Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. No cases, but country on high alert for Mpox. Search still on for missing 4-year-old from Westmoreland. And later in sports, ISA President blasts JFF over lack of recognition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shane Masters, and here are the details. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says there are no cases of Mpox in Jamaica at this time, but the country remains on high alert. Speaking at a press conference a short while ago, Dr. Tufton assured the public that the ministry has enhanced surveillance and increased testing capacity for the virus.
On the advice of the International Health Regulations Emergency Committee of Independent Experts, the World Health Organization, WHO, determined that the upsurge of Mpox in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and a growing number of countries in Africa constitutes a public health emergency of international concern under the International Health Regulations Act. On August 14th, 2024, the WHO declared Mpox as such and noted that the virus had the potential to spread further across countries in Africa and possibly outside of the continent.
Dr. Tufton says there is no need for Jamaicans to panic at this time. He says Mpox cases are not new to Jamaica, as the country has dealt with the virus in the past.
As a reminder, Jamaica recorded its first case of Mpox in July 2022. Between then and March 2023, the country had recorded a total of 21 confirmed cases. And the breakdown of this over those years would be 2022, 18 cases, 2023, 3 cases, and to date in 2024, we have had no case, even though we had one suspicion, but it was confirmed as negative at one of our hospitals.
The government says it will not relent in targeting gangs across the island. National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says a special gang task force, which has been established, will have the backing of the government and the requisite resources will be allocated to carry out their operations. His comment comes after 2 mass shootings in Clarendon and St. Catherine, just over a week apart. In total, 27 persons were shot, 9 died.
There is no attempt to provide cover for any gangs anywhere in the force, and they're actively pursuing it. We have specially trained detectives in every division who works with the intelligence units to monitor and track the gangsters. We are a small country, and right now there's good knowledge of almost all the gangsters. What we need is evidence, and this is why I'm very pleased that the commissioner in his own transition is set about to place emphasis on training specialized detective officers who are out there focused on particular priority areas, which among them, of course, is gangs.
Currently, there are 19 gang cases before the courts. In the meantime, Dr. Chang says attempting to discredit police statistics and the handling of crime is doing more harm than good.
To raise issues of the work of the police force in a society in which we still have extremely high violence, especially when the police is beginning to get the results that we all seek to have. Whatever our interest drives that questioning and that attempt to undermine our police force is certainly not in the best interest of the country.
Dr. Chang also provided an update on the investigations into the Cherry Tree Lane murders in Clarendon earlier this month. He reiterated that they have identified the international players.
They have found at least one of the big players, and we'll be able to track him to where he is. Bear in mind, however, that they do not commit action in the US, so they're not subject to US law enforcement. So we have to gather enough evidence of the involvement in Jamaica that we can then seek extradition. If they are there legally, of course, once we find them, they send them home. So it's a multi-step approach, and we are pursuing all angles that is required to bring all of the perpetrators to justice.
An appeal this afternoon for the return of a 4-year-old Westmoreland boy who went missing on Sunday, August 18. Details in this report. Where is he? The question on the mind of Tricia Thomas, the grand aunt and caregiver of 4-year-old Shaquille Patterson, otherwise known as Papa. It's understood that Shaquille was at a grave digging with Miss Thomas on Sunday when he went missing. According to the grand aunt, they were at the grave site in Friendship when Shaquille asked her for something to drink around 2:30 p.m. She told him to get a drink and he went to play with another child.
After 4, I asked for Shaquille. No one could tell me where he is. So I'm appealing to the general public for the safe return of my son Shaquille Patterson. I just lost my mom weeks ago and I can't afford to lose 2.
A report was subsequently made to the Whitthorne police. On Monday and Tuesday, search parties were launched to try and locate the missing child, but both searches were unsuccessful. In the meantime, the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA, is calling on anyone with information on the whereabouts of Shaquille to provide the details to the police.
It would be very difficult for a 4-year-old to travel any significant distance by themselves to where a search party would be unable to find them. So we believe that someone must know what has happened to him.
The CPFSA head, Laurette Adams Thomas, went further.
If you see something, say something. If you are too afraid to go to the police, please call 211, which is our 24/7 child abuse reporting hotline, anonymously, and share any information you may know. We need to bring little Shaquille safe.
Mrs. Adams Thomas also shared that the agency is providing psychosocial support to little Shaquille's family. With the frequency of earthquakes across the island, a view that Jamaica could soon experience a quake as powerful as magnitude 8. The warning came from sedimentary geologist at the University of the West Indies, Professor Simon Mitchell, who was speaking on TVJ Smile Jamaica Thursday morning. More in this report. A 5.6 in October last year and a 5.3 magnitude quake on Friday, August 16. A sign that things are developing, according to sedimentary geologist Professor Simon Mitchell. He says based on the analysis of data, the quakes are happening on the various fault lines across the island. Professor Mitchell says it's something Jamaicans should take careful note of. The well-respected geologist says last Friday's quake was not on the Wagwater Fault.
At the northern end of Wagwater Fault, so you follow up into St Mary, and you can see that it goes under some sedimentary rocks which have not been faulted, which means it must have moved. The last time it moved was before those rocks were deposited on it. So we actually do know that it really hasn't moved significantly for a good period of time. Now, the new solution we've got for this last earthquake shows it actually wasn't on the Wagwater Fault. It was close to the Wagwater Fault, but it was a fault that was actually cutting it. And a fault that's orientated east-west is a well-known fault, and it's called the Cavaliers Fault.
In the meantime, a warning to Jamaicans to brace for a big one.
And my concern is that this is pushing stress further to the west, and that's likely to go on from one of these faults. So the Central Jamaican Fault is one, but there's also the South Coast Fault, which is probably the longest fault, and extends along the whole coast of the island, effectively. So if you go to Lover's Leap, for instance, you've got really steep, high cliffs. That's because that's the fault. And that's a very long one. And that one has the potential to produce a very large earthquake. A 7, certainly, but even potentially up to an 8.
But what would the damage from such a quake look like?
The biggest areas that are going to suffer are the ones on the flat ground. So Kingston, Portmore are on flat ground. And the thing about that is it's soft ground. It's made of sediments. It's made of unconsolidated sediments. Whereas if you're on the limestones, they're not unconsolidated. They're very strong, and therefore you don't get such
damage.
an event. or the shaking is less, let's put it like that. So the concern is areas that are flat.
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. With school just days away from reopening, Education Minister Fayval Williams has warned educators that collectively they'll have to redouble their efforts in tackling violence in schools. Mrs. Williams, who was speaking at the JTA's 60th anniversary conference in Trelawney on Wednesday, noted that despite efforts to curb the issue, it still continues to plague our schools.
I know it's a vexed issue that is of concern to the education sector, especially at the secondary level. And that is the matter of violence by and among students. And there have been too many instances of maladaptive behavior.
In her 2024-25 sectoral debate presentation recently, the minister revealed that a total of 55 critical incident reports, mostly related to violence in schools, were reported to the Education Ministry between January 2022 and January 2023.
Incidents occur, they loom large in the public's consciousness and overshadow all the efforts of our principals, our teachers, our parents.
Frustrated residents, particularly the elderly, are pleading with the authorities to fix the issues at a Paymaster in Morant Bay, St. Thomas. They complain that as a result of its closure, they have been experiencing difficulties accessing their usual path payments. Residents added that they have been redirected to the Yalas branch, but that location cannot provide funds for everyone. Some say that since Monday, they've made several trips to the branch with hopes they will get the payout, but have had no success.
Them a cause Morant Bay people, like Morant Bay people, them a couldn't do problem. We don't do no problem. See, every time them a tell us the money done. The money done. We part program money. They want help. We need help. Are we hungry? And we have to pay for how much in pay for come here for money. It's hard. We don't have it.
They say the situation has been really inconvenient, especially with the cost of traveling.
Some people sick. The older people then came and walk. $250 for go Morant Bay and $250 for go Yalas. And at the end of the day, some we don't have it. The old people them fainting. This is not real. So to find somewhere for Morant Bay people don't get them on. No can't just send down the Morant Bay people them for the people them in Yalas. The end of the day, look at people that sleep on the street. When I feel that this is right, the people are not mad people, boy. Too much of mad people, old people, young people is stronger than the older one them. $250 go Morant Bay, $250 go back to Yalas. Lunch money, right now people out there drop down and I feel they're hungry.
And it's now time for the Business Minute. The central bank says businesses expect inflation to be lower over the next few months. In the latest Monetary Policy Committee report, the central bank says in the June 2024 survey of businesses' inflation expectations, firms were of the view that inflation over the next 12 months would be an average 7.6%. This is down from the previous sentiment of 8.2%. The central bank says this reflects a continuation of a declined trend since the middle of 2022. It also says expectations about the local currency falling in value are also more favorable. Further afield, according to new data, U.S. job growth during much of the past year was a lot weaker than initially estimated. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics suggests 818,000 fewer jobs were added in the year leading up to March. It's the largest downward revision since 2009 and shows the labor market wasn't quite as red hot as it initially appeared. However, job growth was still strong. The estimates released by the Labor Department on Wednesday are preliminary and won't be finalized until February 2025. And that's it for the Business Minute. Time now for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, Haitian Prime Minister Gary Coney has told the new commander of the Armed Forces of Haiti, Lieutenant General Darby Guerrier, that his role will be crucial as efforts continue to bring peace and stability to the country. Earlier this week, the government renewed a state of emergency for several areas until September 19, adding that curfews may be established if necessary in the departments and districts where a state of emergency has been declared. Haiti has been without an elected head of state since July 7, 2021, when Jovenel Moïse was assassinated at his private residence overlooking Port-au-Prince. The United Nations says gang wars have displaced more than 578,000 Haitians, while nearly 5 million are facing acute hunger, with 1.6 million of those people at risk of starvation. On the international scene, Gaza ceasefire talks are set to resume in Egypt this weekend. The White House says President Joe Biden called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday. Meanwhile, a school in central Gaza was damaged after an Israeli airstrike yesterday. Israel says Hamas was using the facility but hasn't given evidence to show that. Gaza Civil Defense says the blast killed at least 2 people and injured 10 children. More than 300,000 people in southern eastern Bangladesh have been impacted by heavy rainfall and flooding. More than 25,000 of those impacted are currently sheltering in relief camps. According to a Bangladesh official, hundreds of homes were submerged, with the Army, Navy, and youth volunteers all aiding rescue efforts. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Raquel Porto.
Thanks, Raquel. And we head to a quick break. When we come back, Renardo Brown will have their midday sports report.